morning, everybody, and Jim, thank you for those kind remarks. It is a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate being invited to speak at the conference. It looks like it's an exciting few days for you, filled with interesting and informative programs and activities. You will obviously hear from many accomplished engineers, and you will receive all sorts of technical tools and techniques to improve what you do every day. Many thanks to the sponsors that have been recognized here. This is a terrific gathering, and it is a real honor to be here representing them as well. I have some prepared remarks I'll give, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So think about your questions as I go through my remarks. As I said, you'll hear all sorts of technical ideas and details from others, but that is not what you're going to hear from me. First of all, it's been over 3 decades since I did a day-to-day engineering job, and I doubt that I could offer you anything that would be of any technical value. But I spent those last 3 decades leading organizations in highly technical fields, surrounded and powered largely by engineers. I've traveled the world and seen the impact of technology applied to improve the lives of many and even change societies. I've seen the impact of developing affordable energy and clean water to remote areas of Africa and Asia. And I have come to believe that the world needs many more engineers to tackle the many challenges we face today, like climate change, efficient transportation, and environmentally friendly processes. And while all disciplines of engineering are needed, and many are in short supply, the industrial and systems engineer has a unique place among them all. Quoting the University of San Diego's Industrial and Systems Engineering website, industrial and systems engineers figure out how to do things better. Simply put, the world needs more of us to make things better. I don't know how each of you selected this field, but I was an accidental IIE major. I grew up in Central Florida during the heyday of the space program. I loved everything that flew, and I desperately wanted to fly airplanes, and later dreamed of being an astronaut. Both were foolish dreams for a young girl in the 50s and 60s. I was good at science and math, and my parents always told me I could do anything I wanted to do. A 7th grade math teacher introduced me to engineering and explained that I could take my science and math skills and apply them to solve problems and design things. I was hooked. I was the first girl in my high school to take engineering drawing. This was long before any computer-aided design tools existed, and I was a straight-A student. I was accepted into the honors program at the University of Florida, and I had every intention of becoming an aerospace engineer. If I couldn't fly planes, I could design them. I was one of only 2 women in my class in all disciplines of engineering at the University of Florida. And during my sophomore year, the bottom completely fell out of the aerospace market, and funds were drastically cut for the space program. So I decided it would probably be a good idea to get a broader education. That was when I discovered industrial and systems engineering. I still took some basic design classes, but I learned so much more in IIE. I learned how to take complex problems and break them into component parts so each could be resolved and optimized. I learned how to make existing processes work better and faster. I learned how to analyze designs to improve reliability and quality. But most important, I learned how to think without bias and how to deal with facts. And here's where my ISE degree transformed my future career. A few years after graduating, I learned that this ISE approach to thinking and solving problems worked just as well when managing people as it did when optimizing a design or process. And much to my surprise, I love the people part of it as much, if not better, than the technical challenges. When I graduated from college, I narrowed my job offers to the two of greatest interest. One from General Electric and their management training program at Appliance Park in Louisville, Kentucky, and one with the Harris Corporation, an aerospace and defense contractor, as a research and development engineer in Melbourne, Florida. I went with my first love and took the job at Harris. I stayed in the aerospace and defense industry for 42 years. Through those years, I came to believe that we all have an obligation to make a difference, and that we ISE grads are uniquely placed to make a difference in the world today. I went on to break down many barriers for women in engineering, and there is no industry more male-dominated than aerospace and defense. My career culminated when I became the first female CEO of a major aerospace and defense contractor. I have often said that I am largely who I am because of those years I spent in engineering school at Florida. But I am one of many who have made an impact by leveraging and applying my industrial engineering and systems engineering skills and education throughout my career. I'd like to share with you today a few of the varied faces and stories of the industrial and systems engineer. Perhaps it can inspire you to embrace what you are doing beyond technical boundaries and to define your own role in making the world a better place. Perhaps the most famous and impactful industrial engineer today is Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from Auburn University in 1982. In 1998, he left a safe job at Compaq to join Apple and work with Steve Jobs, someone he has called a creative genius. Cook tells the story of when he interviewed with Jobs. Within those first 5 minutes, he knew he would throw caution to the wind and join Apple, a very risky bet at that time. As we all know, his risk paid off in spades, and today he is recognized as one of the most influential men in the world, leading the most valuable company in the world. But Tim Cook has made an impact beyond his professional successes with the Apple brand. Despite being an intensely private man, on October 30th, 2014, Cook came out as gay in an editorial for Bloomberg Businessweek. He concluded the article by writing, "We paved the sunlit path toward justice, brick by brick. This is my brick." We will never be able to quantify how many people he inspired and validated their right to be exactly who they are without guilt and shame. A truly great and selfless man who has already made his mark and will undoubtedly leave this world a better place, professionally and personally. Now, not all of us can grow up to lead a company like Apple, but every dimension of life can be influenced and improved with the leadership and contribution of an industrial engineer. Even the game of football, my favorite sport and passion. Even if you aren't such a fan, it is hard to dispute the impact that Tom Landry had on professional football. The former Dallas Cowboys head coach truly revolutionized the way the game is played. Although he played football at the University of Texas, few people know he graduated from the University of Houston's Cullen College of Engineering in 1952 with a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. The University of Houston once asked Landry's son if his famous football father made use of his engineering education as the Dallas Cowboys head coach. He responded, and I quote, "I think there is no doubt about it. That was his answer. That was how he analyzed the game as an engineer, and he said so many times." So just how successful was this engineer head coach? Between 1966 and 1983, the Cowboys advanced to the NFL playoffs 17 out of 18 seasons, appeared in 5 Super Bowls, and won 2 World Championships. In 1990, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame and is widely recognized as football's greatest innovator of all time. He brought computer analysis techniques to improve scouting and drafting of players, helping him and his staff to identify players with the greatest potential as well as detect talent and ability. His methods ultimately were adopted by the entire league. Not bad for an industrial engineer. Landry is quoted as having said, "I don't believe in team motivation. I believe in getting a team prepared so it knows it will have the necessary confidence when it steps on the field and be prepared to play a good game." I'd say his engineering training served him, the Dallas Cowboys, and the game of football quite well. Also near and dear to my heart is the story of Michael Hudson, a name not commonly recognized, but that in no way diminishes his accomplishments. He grew up poor, the grandson of sharecroppers. He went on to realize not only his dream, but mine too. He became an astronaut. His undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering, and his master's degree was in systems engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology. He also earned a master's in space science. An accomplished Air Force pilot with more than 1,800 hours in 35 different aircraft, he joined NASA in 1993 as a systems engineer. A veteran of 3 space flights, he was also a model of determination. While in the astronaut program, he applied to 7 selection cycles over 13 years and was interviewed 5 times before he ever got to fly. He said his pursuit of this career was beyond passion. It was a calling. He realized his dream on the 4th of July, 2006. He is just one of many accomplished, unsung heroes who took their engineering education and made a difference in the world. I could continue to tell you stories of accomplished individuals who chose our field of engineering, but no discussion of great industrial engineers is complete without the story of Lillian Gilbreth. She and her husband Frank were pioneers in what we know today as industrial engineering. Focused on worker efficiency, human factors, and industrial productivity, they defined many of the scientific and industrial management principles in use today. Many have referred to her as the first superwoman, not only because of her engineering accomplishments, because she simultaneously raised 12 children, most of them alone after Frank's untimely death. The story of their family was chronicled in the book and movie Cheaper by the Dozen. Born in 1878 to parents of German descent, she was a very shy girl, but a very good student. She achieved many great academic accomplishments, culminating with a PhD in psychology. Her study largely focused on human behavior and its importance in optimizing work and tasks. The Gilbreths introduced novel ideas for their time, like employee suggestion boxes, rest periods, process charts, and alternative work. They even developed ways to employ people with disabilities. Lillian went on to work at General Electric, optimizing appliances for consumers. Two of her inventions were the shelves inside the refrigerator door and the foot pedal trash can. After working in industry, she joined academia as the first female professor in the engineering school at Purdue. Any Boilermakers out here today? What a groundbreaking feat that was. This pioneering woman wrote often about balancing family and work and how supportive her family was of her work. It is unfortunate that many women still struggle with this issue today and that we are still having that dialogue. She died in 1972, the year I graduated from college. But she remains one of the icons that proved you can have both a fulfilling career, an extraordinary family life, and an impact on the world around you. She was the first woman elected to the National Academy of Engineering and was the first woman to receive the Hoover Award, an award jointly bestowed by 5 leading engineering organizations recognizing great, unselfish, non-technical services by engineers to humanity. And with 12 kids, no less. I struggled with just one. Truly, struggled with just one. My daughter would second that, by the way. So I hope you draw inspiration from the 4 people I have profiled today. They are just a snapshot of the many industrial and systems engineers that make everyday differences in our lives, our companies, and our world. But I would be remiss if I did not share with you something that became apparent during our research for these remarks. It greatly troubles me that despite the contribution of Lillian Gilbreth, the field is still predominantly white and male. I have spent much, much time over the last 20 years promoting engineering, particularly ISE, as a terrific career for women and minorities. But we have made little progress in capturing the hearts and minds of kids early enough so that they get the right science and math training to prepare them to study engineering in college. And then there is that small matter that engineering school is hard. Try getting a 13-year-old excited about that. But then if you take it to the next level and you talk about earning power and the ability to make a difference, you begin to get their attention. In November of 2014, Forbes published an article on the college degrees with the highest starting salaries in 2015. The top 8 degrees were in engineering. I stay engaged with young people because they represent the future, and it helps keep me grounded. I think it matters that we bring thoughtful, well-educated, and socially aware young people into our thought processes and plans now, not 20 years from now when they have paid their dues. My colleagues and I work on optimizing the effectiveness of multi-generational workforces and helping leaders of my generation connect better with all ages. These challenges are tailor-made for us engineers, and each one of us must rise to the occasion. Ursula Burns, the African-American female CEO of Xerox, says it best: "My entire existence, my business personality, my practices at work, how I lead, manage, and interact, The foundation of it all is my engineering education. I moved from engineering to business, but the difference is not a difference at all. The synergy between the two is amazing. I could not have said it better. There is an increasing need and demand in all industries for individuals with the ability to think broadly and manage complex systems while grasping the intricacies and details that must be defined, integrated, and optimized. Whether you are an engineer, an academic, or a business leader, an industrial and systems engineering background uniquely positions you to tackle tough issues and solve the problems facing the world today. The great author James Michener said, "Scientists dream about doing great things. Engineers do them." My challenge to you is to be one of those doers. Our children and our grandchildren are depending on you. Thank you for having me, and I'd be happy to take your questions. Okay, somebody always has to be first. I'm going to stand here until somebody asks questions. Here comes a brave person.
Thank you so much for your comments. Gina Glover, current president of the Society of Engineering and Management Systems within IIE that everyone should join. So you talked a little bit about this relationship between engineering and management and with Ursula's quote. Could you talk a little bit about your transition from kind of maybe a more traditional engineering job that you might have had at BAE and transitioning into the CEO role, and how you maintained your technical capabilities as well as your managerial prowess?
Thank you for the question. I think someone argued that I didn't necessarily retain my technical capabilities, but it's, you know, the transition, I actually had a hard point where I made the decision which way I was going to go. I got married right out of college and worked for 4 years at Harris, and my husband had grown up in California and desperately wanted to move from Florida to California. So, I mean, we were in our 20s, why not? So we moved to California, and I had 2 job offers to choose from. One was what was then Ford Aerospace, and it was like a group leader type role in reliability engineering, and the other job was from the Aerospace Corporation, which is a nonprofit think tank for the Air Force and NASA and that sort of thing, and it was the ultimate engineer's dream job, with unlimited budgets and all the greatest of everything. And I had to pick between the 2. And I stood back and thought about what I had liked the most about the first 4 years of my career, and I decided it was the people part of the job more so than the technical part of it. And so I made a conscious decision at that point to move into a quasi-management type role. And then it was just a matter of taking opportunities as they came along. Someone quit that was supposed to be the new quality assurance manager of a division of Ford Aerospace, and someone decided that I'd be a good person to step into that. So I went from literally being an engineering group leader to a manager of a department with 250 employees overnight in a field I knew absolutely nothing about. And so that was when I really leapt into a much bigger management job, and from there I just never looked back. It was something I enjoyed doing, and I did it in a number of different disciplines: quality assurance, production management, program management, and so on. So the evolution into general management just happened. It was not something I could have ever imagined. I certainly never imagined I'd ever end up being a CEO. When I started out, I just wanted to be a good engineer. But opportunities presented themselves, and I took every one that came along, and it worked out pretty good over time. Becoming a CEO was harder than I expected. I thought I had had really big jobs up to that point, And I thought, you know, how much bigger or harder can it be to move up to the next level? It is harder, and having no one that you're accountable to other than your board of directors puts you in a very different world. The external demands on your time, the media demands on your time are something that you can't prepare for without being there. And but all my life I fall back on, okay, I can do this, let's break it down into the pieces and let's tackle it one piece at a time. And I go back to my old engineering training, and any complex problem, whether it be at work or even in my personal life, I step back and say, okay, I can do this, let's just break it down into manageable parts. And that's kind of how it worked. So, worked out okay.
So as you went from engineer to CEO, can you tell us more about how much on-the-job training you received versus additional schooling to get to where you are?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree, and that's it, other than a couple of really great honorary degrees, but they don't really count in terms of, they happen after the fact. So I would say most of my training was on-the-job training. I always intended to go back and get an MBA. My career took off so fast that I wasn't willing to take the time out or away to do it, and I was traveling so much, the idea of doing an executive MBA program just didn't fit into my schedule. So I learned on the job. A lot of people helped me along the way, and I'm an avid reader. I study things, and on my own have taught myself a number of things. And even today, I mean, I'm on the board of one of the biggest banks in the world, and I don't have a finance background. So learning banking, I tell you, is tough. And yet I'm a big believer that life is a long-time learning journey, and doing things that require you to pay attention and learn something new is what keeps me going. And I really wish I had had the opportunity to pursue more education. Financially, I couldn't do it right out of school. I had no money, my parents had no money, so I needed a job. And then the opportunity never presented itself to go back. So I think it's a good mix when you can, mix on-the-job training with either formal education or various training programs and other programs that are out there. That's the best of all worlds. For me, it was mostly hands-on learning as I went and reaching out and asking people for help. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to thank you for your very, very inspiring remarks. I particularly liked your comment about remembering your roots as an engineer or as an industrial engineer and building on that, because I share that same feeling with you. You remarked about how little progress we've made in our discipline in the workforce with respect to the diversity of the people working in this field. It's still predominantly male and still predominantly white. So what advice do you have for all of us on how to diversify this field in a significant way? Is there a secret? What are we not doing? Thank you.
If I had the complete answer to that, I would have done it so far, but it's hard. We're talking cultural change, we're talking about change that has to affect kids at a very young stage, and that makes it even harder. And what I have not yet been able to find, and perhaps those of you that are coming along behind me can find it, was the space program was what captured my heart and mind at a very young age. And I knew what I wanted to do. I don't think we put the right kind of role models in front of kids today for them to say, I really want to be like this person or that person. And I think we all have an obligation to get out there. Go work with school kids. Tell them about the cool work you're doing. I mean, some of the things that are being done with FIRST Robotics and programs like that can really engage kids and let them see it may be hard, but it's really rewarding and exciting. That is not going to happen when, in this very digitally linked world, the role models people see are, no offense to anyone, I hope, Kim Kardashian and crazy musicians and I mean, it's just not. We don't see role models held in high esteem that children can aspire to be like someone. And I think that means we all have to get out there more and interact with children, go help out in the schools, tell your stories, and I think it will get better. The pipeline in school is getting better, not as good as it should be. I know in Florida this year, 26% of the incoming engineering students were female. When I was there, there were 2. So, not 2%, 2 people. And so, the pipeline's there, but it often doesn't make it out of the educational world necessarily into the business world. And I've worked on a number of programs. I worked on a presidential initiative with people like Ursula Burns and the former Sally Ride, the first female astronaut, called Change the Equation, trying to get big corporations to focus on this. And big corporations are focused on this, but change is just not coming at the pace any of us would like. So it's a work in process, and all of you have an obligation to help. Yes?
Hi, yeah, also thank you for speaking. This has been really interesting and pretty inspirational. As a student at NJIT, I'd like to know what do you attribute as the biggest factor to your success today, to what sort of brought you from where you were in school to where you are now?
I doubt that there's just one, but I think a lot of it is just determination and perseverance. I'm one of those people that see barriers and turn them into challenges rather than disappointments, and I had to, because of what I faced as I was coming up through certainly my corporate career. And I never thought about the next job. Every job I had, I knew that I could make them forget that I was female if I did it better than everybody else around me. Because bosses like to be successful, and if you help make them successful, they will help make you successful. And early on, I figured out that was the ticket to getting past what was a very difficult barrier in the 70s. And I just stuck with that throughout my entire career. I never planned or thought about what was next. The opportunities came because I excelled at what I did at any one point in time. Now, I was politically astute. I knew how the corporation worked. I volunteered for high-risk assignments, so I would get visibility, and it wasn't complete mole, sitting at my desk. But it was really all about excellence and determination, and not, if somebody did something that I thought was wrong or left me out, I made sure in an appropriate way I pointed out I should have been considered for something. But beyond that, it's just a lot of hard work. There's nothing magic to this at all. Yes?
Good morning, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being a great role model for all of the women here in the audience. You said earlier that you didn't have the opportunity to continue your education, but that you read a lot.
Yeah.
So can you give us a top 10 list of books we should all be reading?
Gosh, I get asked that more. I should have a snappy answer to it. Depends on what kind of topic you want to talk about. I read my share of junk novels like everybody else does, but I used to call them trash novels, and my PR people would cringe when I would say that, but I don't have to worry about that anymore. So, but no, I have a favorite business book that, of all the business books I have, is the most tattered on my bookshelf, and that's the book Leading Change by John Kotter of Harvard. Just something about that book. Every time I've been faced with a big challenge, when I needed to reorganize something or do something, I just found myself going back to his steps you need to go through when you're facing facing big change. Warren Bennis's classic book on becoming a leader is something that I think everybody ought to read. And I'll give a plug for two friends of mine who wrote a book in the last year called The Confidence Code. Katty Kay and Claire Shipman, both media people. Katty's with BBC and Claire with ABC. And it's about women and confidence. And I think they did an extraordinary job. So for women, I think it's a terrific book to read, and I'm quoted in that book. So that's a plug. No, it's actually a very good book. And I've been reading a lot of books lately about how the mind works. I'm really interested in multi-generational workforces and how the mind has developed differently with different decades and people. So I'm reading a lot about mind and psychology and generational thinking, and don't have anything that jumps out really big at the moment. I'm in the midst of reading a book that's interesting but not a quick read called Women After All, which is very interesting about the evolution of gender and those types of things. So, I just love to read. So.
Hi, Chris Gatchell from Boeing. Having been a CEO in the aerospace and defense industry, what do you see as the challenges in the future for the industry as it evolves over the next 20 years or so?
Yeah, I know a lot of folks at Boeing, and it's a challenged industry at the moment, particularly the defense side. I mean, the commercial aerospace side is going gangbusters at the moment, but defense has been difficult over the last few years since the build-up for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, when there was more money than anybody knew how to spend. It's been going in the other way. When I took over as CEO, we were about pushing a $20 billion company. By the time I left, we were a $13 billion company. Some of that was because we sold some things off, but the rest of it was largely downturn in defense spending. And frankly, I don't think over the next 4 or 5 years, unless there is another really tragic event like a 9/11 or something, that there's going to be much growth in defense spending. And so it's challenging. Companies have been downsizing and working on improving productivity and all those kind of things for the last several years, so that when things do take off, I think we'll have a healthier industry than we did before. It's performing better than it has in a long time. The companies are healthy, they're making a lot of money, they're just not really growing. So, defense is cyclical. I've been through 4 cycles in defense over the course of my career, and it will come back because the world is not a friendly place. In fact, right now it's probably more dangerous than it's ever been at any time in my lifetime. And most people don't realize how unstable things are in the world at the moment. So our country needs to have the resources and the capabilities available to use them when needed, and then we all hope they don't have to be used. But it is very important that we be ready. My son-in-law is a Marine, so it's personal to me that we be ready. But I don't think the next couple of years is going to be a lot of fun. I'm kind of glad I'm not there anymore. So.
If you were invited to serve on the advisory board of any of the departments of industrial engineering representing this conference, what are the 3 most important things you think that department should achieve with an undergraduate degree?
That's a terrific question, and I do serve on advisory boards. So what I have thought from being a hirer now of engineers, or used to be, oftentimes engineers in all disciplines come out of college and they may have a great engineering education, but they're not terribly useful to those of us in industry. And it's often because they don't know how to communicate, they don't understand business ethics and how things work and what the obligations are. And when I say they can't communicate, that's both verbally and written. And they really haven't had any exposure to business practices or understanding leadership and how the real world works. The real world is not a nice place, and People come in with expectations that everybody's going to be treated fairly and the world is a happy place, and it isn't. So we spend the first few years oftentimes teaching all those other skills on top of the technical skills. And in some of the work I've done with University of Florida, we've actually incorporated some of those aspects into a leadership institute that's available to engineers, and had created events where people have an opportunity to stand up and give presentations and learn more about communicating, because you can be the best engineer in the world, but if you cannot communicate your ideas effectively, you're of absolutely no use to an organization. So think about it, and there's all kinds of ways outside of school you can do that, through Toastmasters or other organizations that can help you learn to speak publicly. You can take writing classes, but it is a glaring shortcoming in many of the engineers we see coming out of college into the real world. And I've been a broken record on that for a long time. Yes?
I was fortunate, sorry, here.
Yeah, I'm seeing you. I was just watching what was going on over there too.
I was fortunate to be able to get my start in industrial engineering through FIRST Robotics, and I was kind of surprised to see once I got to school that only a handful of other students even knew what industrial or systems engineering were. And I think that a large part of this is due to a transparency issue we have as to what industrial engineering is, and I was wondering what strategies you have to educate people as to what we do.
Well, as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say this morning, and I was wandering through ISC websites of all the different universities, I truly think that the University of San Diego quote that, we make things better. It's kind of like the BASF commercial, we don't make the carpet, we make it better. It's to tell people that, we're the ones that pull it all together and optimize it, and think about building an airplane or think about building a complex system. Somebody has got to be in charge of it all. And in my mind, that is what distinguishes us. You can be the mechanical designer and design the airframe or the electronics guy and do the avionics. Somebody's got to put it all together and it's got to work. And somebody's got to optimize those interfaces and define them. And to me, that is the real beauty of what we're trained to do. It's to think in a broad and complex way. And so when I talk about it, I try to find the right example for whatever group I'm talking to. I'm talking about building a car. You can put it in any frame you want to. But the breadth of what you learn and its applicability to just about everything in life is the pitch I give to people. You don't want to get pigeonholed in this discipline or that discipline. You want to be able to do many things. And frankly, I had job offers that ranged from a plant manager making jeans to appliance part for GE or working in aerospace and defense. And how many other disciplines would allow you that breadth of opportunity? And I think that's really the sales pitch on why this is kind of, in my view, of course I'm biased, the mother of all engineering degrees. So, and I said mother, by the way. Did I see somebody over here? Yeah.
So you mentioned you studied intergenerational dynamics in the workplace and that sort of thing. So as a lot of baby boomers begin to reach retirement age, what's some of the best things millennials like me can do to capture some of that knowledge before it disappears?
Well, my view is we all need to start working together now. And I tried to make that point in my remarks. People of my generation often think, you millennials, well, you'll have some value 20 years from now when you learn what the world is all about. I think that's nonsense. By the way, first of all, you're a lot smarter and more aware than we ever were at your age. And so the way I pitch it when I'm talking to people is you've got to start creating multi-generational work teams. You've got to have workspaces that accommodate the different ways people work. When I went to school and when I started in industry, it was all an individual sport. We didn't do anything in teams. We didn't collaborate. You were out there to kill everybody else. It was not about doing things together. That's not the way the world works now. And Values are different, expectations are different, so reward systems have to change. Everything has to be rethought if you're going to have a collective integrated workforce. And if we don't do that now, when my generation en masse starts to exit in the next few years, it's going to leave a huge void of a lack of experience, and there's no reason for that. There's no reason that 4 or 5 generations should not be working together on the same things. And just think of how much better those outcomes would be if we had those many different ideas. And then the boomers learn from the millennials learn from the boomers, and everybody in between gets better. So I'm just on a soapbox these days about reorganizing office designs, reorganizing work, reorganizing reward systems, because it isn't all about money now with everybody else. It was all about money and power with my generation. Now it's more often about flexible work and rewarding work and making a difference. And every reward system in a corporation today, well, every is probably too strong, most corporations today is geared toward people like me. And that has got to change. So if you find yourself in a work environment where you can encourage even experiments with multi-generational teams, I would suggest you do that. It's fun. We work that way. in my consulting company, we have a multi-generational team. So go over here.
Yep.
It's hard to see from here, so if you see me gazing, it's not for lack of attention.
I'm Elizabeth Schweitzer with the IIE Young Professionals in the Walt Disney Company. Again, want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come chat with us. We hear a lot about the importance between balancing our work and our personal lives, and you alluded to it a little bit when you were talking about Lillian Gilbreth and yourself. So if you could give us some thoughts about how you've been able to manage your personal and professional career as they've evolved and as they've grown, and prioritizing balance between the two.
First of all, I don't believe there's such a thing as balance. But I do think there is such a thing as the effective integration of your work and your personal lives. And you have to get your head around, you can't just walk out the door at work and go home and have work not interrupt your life. It doesn't work that way anymore, particularly in this global environment where time zones and such have people working while you're at home. And it took me a while to get my head around, it's okay that work interferes, at a certain time in the evening and to be able to turn it on and off, because I think you have to be able to turn it on and off. And to realize that when you have a few hours of free time, make the best of it, because you might get interrupted that evening at home. And frankly, this is where technology, I think, rather than being harmful, is helpful. You can say, I'm not going to look at my smartphone for the next 2 hours, and don't look at it, and have dinner with your family or do whatever you want to do, and then go back to it later, because it will be there. And that is so much better than having somebody call you on the phone and interrupt you in midstream of whatever you're doing. It's much easier for you to plan in and out if you can do it with your electronic devices. And then you just have to plan your personal time. I'm a big believer in taking vacations, but I always stay in touch. But I don't let it interfere with what I'm doing on vacation. When I'm on vacation, I tell my folks, I'll look at my phone in the morning, and I'll look at it at night before I go to bed, and you will have an answer to anything you want within 24 hours. But unlike during the day, it's not going to be within 5 minutes. And unless the world is coming to an end, don't call me and don't bother me. And it works, and we all have that kind of same understanding about how we're going to be. But nobody can just tune out. And I know there are people that disagree with me, but that's my view. And I've never left a day's vacation on the table in 42 years. I never even rolled a day over into the next year. I found a way and carved out the time. But I often have to plan my time a year in advance. But I get it on the calendar and it's scheduled and I go. And I'm a big world traveler, and I go to really cool and interesting places, and if I'm lucky, then I have a cell signal. So, you know, there's no magic here, but life has changed, and I found it impossible to just leave work behind, but I think you can work at effectively integrating it so you still do everything you want to do, and don't have an expectation of balance. I think having an expectation of balance will set you up for failure. And I didn't do it particularly well. If you ask my daughter, she'll tell you I didn't do it particularly well. But somehow we managed to live through it. She's now an adult with 3 kids. So, you know, somehow we manage. And there's a great study that just came out of Harvard. It was in the Harvard Business Review or something. I saw it attributed to Harvard anyway. That children of women who work have better outcomes in life than children of women who don't. And I thought, thank God, there's a validator out there somewhere. So, unfortunately, I don't have any magic wand there, but it can be done, and you know, it works out pretty well.
Hello, Holger. Thank you very much for your time earlier. At the start of your talk, you addressed sustainability or environmental issues that seem to be some of the larger problems that we're facing. What I'm curious about is many times I feel like academics may be focusing on Western problems but not necessarily global problems, and I was wondering if you could explore or explain a little bit how you see us as industrial engineers able to assemble our forces for the greater good, which is also the global good.
Yeah, excellent question. I don't share your view that academics are just focused on the Western world, and I mean, I have seen some extraordinary things going on in Africa and Southeast Asia where American engineers and American groups are doing some pretty extraordinary work, and I think we need more of it. In America in general, we're not very globally aware. Look at the evening news, and how much do you see, go online, and how much do you see about what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa or what's happening in other parts of the world. It's just not there, and I don't know what the statistic today is, but it wasn't that many years ago that only 5% of Americans had passports. You know, and if you haven't even thought about it or traveled anywhere or seen it, it's easy to understand why your universe becomes very, very small. And I'm a big advocate of travel and experiences and seeing the way the rest of the world is, because I do think we all have an obligation to help make the world a better place, not just our country or our community a better place. And environmental challenges are global. They're not just here. You know, if we don't solve the pollution problems with the Chinese and the Indians, the whole world is going to suffer. And I am seeing the beginnings of collaboration. I'm on the board of Southern Company, which is an electric utility. And we're actually doing some work with the Chinese on cleaner coal techniques and such. So I think we all have an obligation to reach beyond our own boundaries and learn what's going on in the world. Pay attention to what's going on in the Middle East. That's pretty significant in our lifetimes and the lifetimes of our kids, how that's going to help shape the world. What's going on in China has been significant for some time. And yet you never read about hardly any of it in any forms of media here in the United States. And I think that's quite unfortunate.